this edition of Speak to Council. We have a full agenda tonight, so we definitely want to encourage you to keep your comments within time limits, and you'll have 2 minutes. Due to the number of speakers, we'll have to really be disciplined with that. So when you finish your sentence at the end of your allotted time, staff will notify you. Please address council with the same respect you would like to be treated, and avoid the use of profanity. Of course, we should be fine with that. If you have any handouts for council members, please email them to council account. And with that, I would ask the city clerk to start the proceeding.
Sunshine Jacobs is followed by Michael Murphy.
I have that comment. Even before COVID-19 ravaged our economy, Rochester was facing a budgetary shortfall. Our economy was constricting and our population aging. Our median income of $30,000 annually was less than half $72,000 of our suburban neighbors in Monroe County. Last year, nearly all home and property owners saw significant increases to their property assessments, many between 40% to 90%. The city assessors met with the MNBN and explained that the belief was that Rochester housing property market had changed, that this was an attempt to bring property values closer to current selling prices. The process was explained thoroughly, but such large increases create hardship for many. They benefit only sellers. For those who rent, it is likely that the cost will be passed on to tenants. For those who own, the increased cost means less money to maintain and improve property. Now the budget before you contains what has been termed a modest tax increase. It also seems to include the advancement of various multi-million-dollar projects. Many businesses have been closed for months. Many people have been without income, or at best, a greatly reduced income. Landlords have gone without rent payments as people went without paychecks. Evidence of desperate circumstances has been well publicized in FoodLink's efforts to ensure adequate supplies to many more people. Even for those with a reliable fixed income, for example, Social Security insurance or Social Security disability, there has been an additional cost and budgets are straining. Too many families are struggling to meet minimum daily expenses and increasing costs. A tax increase at this time would create unbearable hardship for many. Rather than generating income for the city, I fear we will see an increase in foreclosures as people choose between food
30 seconds.
And the less than 230,000 of New York City's wealthiest who fled the city during the height of the pandemic did not come to Rochester. Last summer, I spoke before you stating that there are 3 things the city must have to survive: clean water, a fully functioning, fully supported fire and police department. This year, I would revise that statement to include RCSD and DES, for without all of these, the city will crumble. It is time. The rest of that comment was also shared with council in addition before this meeting.
Michael Murphy.
I am writing you in support of the School Resource Officer program. I have served as a school counselor at School of the Arts for the past 16 years and have seen firsthand the many benefits of an SRO. For many of our students, having the SRO in the building is their only chance to develop a positive relationship with law enforcement. The relationships established between the officer and students is effective at both diffusing dangerous situations and even stopping them before they begin. This past school year, I have shared an office suite with the SRO and have witnessed students using him as a resource on a daily basis and having the trust to seek advice that they could only receive in a school from a police officer. The SRO has been a great resource for me over the years to bring students in crisis, help them understand options, and even bring families to bridge the gap between school and home. I hope this program is able to continue to support our schools, students, families, and communities.
Jeffrey Baird.
Conda, can you move your microphone closer to your mouth? It was a little hard to hear.
Sure.
Hi.
Jeffrey is joining us live on Zoom, and your time will start now.
Hi, my name is Jeffrey Baird. I live at 66 Azalea Road, and I wanted to talk about police reform. In 2013, Camden, New Jersey dissolved their police department. All existing officers had to reapply to the new force outside of the existing restrictive union contract. The new application had rigorous psychological testing, and the culture of the new department was one of guardianship rather than of a warrior. Since then, since the change in Camden, homicides have fallen by more than 50%, and their rate for solving homicides is more than 60%. I'll say this to suggest that we should do precisely like Camden, New Jersey. What works from Camden may not work for Rochester. However, we need to rethink how we approach emergency response. Think for a moment about the people you know who became police officers. If I look back to my high school class, it isn't the thoughtful, compassionate people, it's the bullies. I don't think those are the individuals we should send to aid Rochesterians when they are most vulnerable. To be a social worker in New York State, you need a master's degree and 3 years of supervised clinical experience, or put another way, 6 years of post-high school education and 3 years of postgraduate school experience. Our police force is required to have a high school diploma and maybe a year at the police academy, and during which that officer is paid. The starting salary for both of these positions is about the same. So here's my proposal. Let's dissolve RPD to escape the oppressive union contracts and have all existing officers reapply for their
30
jobs.
seconds.
Let's reduce the budget for our new police department by at least 50% and use those funds to pay for social workers to respond to Rochester residents in crisis. We can create a better community, but we need those of you on the city council to be brave and take radical action. Thank you.
Malcolm Cohen.
Rochester's police department, like many police departments around the nation, is at the best of times a leech upon public resources and an unnecessary risk to every citizen. It was absolutely horrifying to discover that they are responsible for approximately 20% of our city's budget. When we actually need their help, they're nowhere to be found. Like when we called for help a few months ago, only to be kept waiting for hours, driven past several times, and then finally told that they refused to do anything productive at all. Or over the last few weekends where fireworks have been lit off nightly in the 19th Ward in violation of noise ordinances and risking burning the city down, and despite multiple people calling for police assistance, nothing is done. Every time I see a police car, my instinctive reaction is fear. When I was in Hebrew school, I learned rather vividly the dangers of a police state, an experience this country has lately seemed all too eager to repeat. I urge the council to refuse to accept the status quo, to draw a line in the sand and say not here. It is well past time that we reimagine public safety in this country, and Rochester should lead rather than cling to the past. I urge the council to reject this budget as written, defund the police.
Evans Close.
Hello. I urge you to please defund 50% of the funding for the police and to focus on funding services that will create public safety by preventative and restorative means. Please prioritize services such as child care, community centers, after-school programs, mental health and substance abuse services, access to jobs, food insecurity, medical access, and restorative justice programs. As a licensed psychotherapist, I have had the opportunity to work intimately with formerly incarcerated individuals. People with substance abuse problems, sexual assault, poverty, racism, violence, domestic violence, and every other concern you can imagine. In all of my experience, it has been very rare that police have helped at all. And just about all calls could have been better dealt with by a compassionate professional without a gun. Our societal problems can be addressed much more successfully with the above mentioned services. For example, drug problems don't get better with arrest. They get better with easily accessible substance abuse counseling services, family and community support, and resources. The prison industrial complex does not make our city safer, and it definitely doesn't rehabilitate people who have committed crimes. Most policing doesn't either. Most calls that officers go out to could be better handled by other better
30
trained
seconds.
professionals and social workers. The vast majority of calls are nonviolent, and the vast majority of cases go unsolved. Oftentimes, police just escalate problems further. I also encourage you to disband the police union and strengthen the Police Accountability Board. I love my community. Please support police defunding to show your love too.
Jennifer Shulman.
Dear members of the Rochester City Council, as the City Council gets ready to vote on the budget for the coming school year, I thought I would write to you about the closing of this school year and what it means to our families at School 43. First, though there seem to be many changes that have occurred to the approved budget, passed at the beginning of May, just some of the changes from the budget book. School 57 was closed instead of being used as a pre-K center. Then it was changed to special education offices and to be used for special education meetings. School 20 was to be closed completely to save money. Now it's being renovated or maintained. I did not really understand exactly what the money being put into it was being used for, to house the returning BOSI students. School 43 was to be closed completely to save money. Now it is being used to house the BOSI's students for the first 4 months of the year, at least while work is being completed on School 20. School 43 had a budget listed of just over 3.5 million in the March budget book, but the district said by closing the building, the savings would be 4.3. This seems to happen at every meeting. Something that was voted on and passed is changed. Information is changed or not accurate. Answers are not given when questions are posed. This leads me to what this has done to our families at School 43. Last Wednesday, our families were allowed to come to the school to pick up their child's belongings. Every parent I talked to was upset, sad, or frustrated. They did not understand why the school was closing. There was hardly any
30
notice
seconds.
that they had no chance to fight for the school. The announcement was leaked to the paper in mid-April, followed by the official notice 3 days later, with only 3 weeks until it was approved. This was the fastest turnaround I'd ever seen in my 25 years in the district. I know these are unprecedented times. However, I find it hard to believe that in less than a month's time, the decision to close a school with over 400 students and no input from the families was made. I believe the district had this in mind for over a year, and unfortunately, staff were caught unawares. Our Grizzly family is truly devastated. The letter that went out for families to pick up their next school was misleading, as families thought that it was just a notice that the school was closed because of the pandemic. Half of the families did not hand it in as of June 9th because they did not understand that the school would never reopen. Our teacher, who had
AJ,
been,
it's time.
sorry, thank you. The rest of that comment was shared with council in advance.
Tora Bixby, Zoom. She will join us by Zoom.
Hi, I'm Katura Bixby. I live in 14605. I'm asking you to defund the police. I know that the police have excellent PR, talking up how much they keep people safe and help us, but we know that that's not the reality. And I have listened to the police. I've talked to many officers and on neighborhood meetings. I even attended the Citizens Police Academy through our PD. And I would like to share what a neighbor told me after the class on use of force. And she said, I came into this class supporting police, but now that I know what they do, I can't anymore. The police cannot solve the problems that they claim to. They're not preventing harm to people that live in our city. Often they're exacerbating it or hurting people themselves. Every year they use an LRAD at the Puerto Rican parade in this dense residential neighborhood with tons of children. They've beaten many Black people in our city. For officers who don't do that themselves, they let their colleagues do it. They tear gassed people a couple weeks ago during a respiratory pandemic. I've tried complaining to the Civilian Review Board about racist enforcement I've seen in my neighborhood, and RPD's professional standards section altered my complaint and didn't uphold it. And I would just like to note that the Police Accountability Board bill passed with overwhelming public support and asked for completely reasonable steps to accountability, and the Locust Club is fighting it. They're refusing accountability to us. So I think that police can't be trusted. They're broken. And it's time for us to imagine new and better solutions. So I would say no to spending $100 million on people who endanger our
30
city
seconds left.
and have shown that they can't be trusted. I want you to cut RPD's funding and use that money instead for housing, food, education, healthcare, and stronger communities. Our city badly needs investment in the social safety net. And what would make us safer is using all $100 million of that money in cash assistance to Rochester. But if you're not ready to do that, please have RPD's budget, and the officers who are laid off can be supported by the improved services in our city when they move here. Thank you.
Elizabeth Board. She'll be joining us. No, that's a voicemail.
Yep, 1 second.
Hi, I'm calling as a concerned citizen. I would like to recommend that the police are removed from the city schools at this time. I also recommend that we waive the cash capital for city schools. Thank you.
Candace Cabral. That's another voicemail.
Hi, yes, I am voicing my opinion saying that I would love to have police officers not in our school anymore. And I was wondering if we are voting to have more social workers and more for other programs and helping, but definitely for our social workers. We are voting to have police officers out of our kids' school. That is my vote. Thank you. Have a great day.
Patricia Leo, voicemail.
Good afternoon, Rochester leaders. My name is Patricia Leo, and I'm calling as an individual that has spent the last 2 decades working to promote the academic success, health, and well-being of every child in our community. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you. I'll be brief as I have just one simple request. As you prepare to vote on the budgets before you, please show Rochester's children that you value them by ensuring the budgets you are approving prioritize their needs. You can do this by maintaining funding for recreation and youth services and by following up on your voiced support for ending police in schools and waiving the cash capital requirement from the Rochester City School District's already deeply cut budget as you wrap up the budget process and vote. Thousands of children are depending upon you to choose them.
Chloe Johnson.
As a city resident, I am urging City Council to meaningfully defund the RPD by 50% and refund the city residents the mismanaged and harmful funds that too long have gone to this violent, unresponsive, and ineffective organization. By RPD's own statistics, they are poor at best with working to solve the crimes that negatively affect our community, while terrorizing our citizens with minor infractions to assert their dominance. I urge the City Council to use those funds for the city residents by fully funding their schools and community needs, and by also allowing us, the residents, to be a part of the discussion in what we would like our money to go towards. Furthermore, I hope that the council can stay focused on the voices of reason and not the voices of fear. We as a city have been taught through these inherently racist systems that we need heavily armed police to feel safe. These fears are irrational, and the statistics prove that. Please stay focused on listening, changing, and moving forward with accountability for what real and meaningful changes you have the power to make. Thank you.
Saudi Muhammad, voicemail.
Hello, my name is Sadiq Muhammad, and I'm calling in opposing the RPD in public schools, looking for them to be armed police in the Rochester City School District. Also for the Rochester City School District to save $10 million by waiving the city's cash capital requirement. In order to require ongoing training in restorative and trauma-informed practices to all youth in the city schools that need it. But yes, again, my name is Sadiq Muhammad, and I'm calling for the city council to waive the $10 cash capital to save the Rochester City School District.
Amanda Flannery.
Hi, my name is Amanda. I'm here to speak in support of defunding the police budget by at least 50% and investing those funds into community resources. I'm not going to spend the time today listing the numbers. You all already know them. The Free the People Rock activists and Danielle Ponder have laid it out for us as clear as day. What they've done is they've cast a vision for a community that doesn't perpetuate and create poverty by trying to outmuscle it with police and guns, but instead outsmart it with resources and common sense. A community that doesn't manufacture crimes which would be ignored on Park Ave or in Pittsford just to stay busy, but who manufactures jobs and provides innovative education for its children. A community where kids who show signs of trauma or violence are not met with the most violent institution in the city, but with mental health services and resources to offer stability and support. This is a community I think we can all agree we'd love to live in. And the Free the People Rock activists have handed us the answer. All you have to do as city council is rise to meet the occasion. We don't need more Band-Aid training. The cop who senselessly murdered Rayshard Brooks just days ago had completed a full day de-escalation training as recently as April. We don't need small cuts. We don't accept your 4% cut that you probably would have made anyway because of COVID, especially while on
30
the
seconds.
talking about investing $30 million into new precincts. What we need from you is courage, and we know you have it. We watched you vote on one of the strongest police accountability boards in the country, and I believe we're about to watch you stand up and defend that vote in court. We need you to do what we voted you in to do. Stand up for our community and make it a better place. Defund the police, invest in the people, write the plan, include the community, and then amend this budget immediately. Thank you.
Jessica Alcantara.
Dear City Council members, we write on behalf of Advancement Project National Office and the Alliance for Educational Justice, AEJ, to fully and enthusiastically support the call to remove Rochester police from schools. If we have learned anything from this historic moment spurred by the murder of George Floyd at the hands of Minneapolis police, it is that police cannot be trusted to keep us safe. Years of Rochester City School District data reflecting a relentless school-to-prison pipeline indicate disparate criminalization of students of color by the police. RCSD has a duty to protect students that already feel like they, quote, live in a community that's been traumatized by police officers, end quote. Officers that roam school hallways are no different from the officers on the streets of Rochester, and thus a new vision of safety must emerge from this crisis. The Minneapolis Police School Board and the Denver Public School Board's recent historic unanimous votes to remove police from schools demonstrates that a police-free school future is both possible and necessary to protect the safety of humanity of Black and Brown children. Our organizations have spent the last few years highlighting the need for police-free schools across the country because we believe that in order for our nation's students to truly thrive, their education and socio-emotional needs must be met by those who qualified to meet those needs, like counselors, psychologists, and social workers. We already know that investment in law enforcement personnel fundamentally fails to make schools safer.
30 seconds.
Instead of paying the Rochester Police Department to police Rochester children, those funds should be allocated toward counseling services, mental health supports, positive behavioral interventions, restorative justice programs, and other methods that create holistically beneficial learning environments for young people. RCSD is particularly well positioned to make this a reality as one of the districts in the country that has already begun implementing restorative justice practices in school with the implementation of the help zones and the ROC restorative team.
Time is up.
The rest
Sarah
of the
Peters.
shared with the council in advance of the meeting.
Members of council, as a former director of the Corner Place and educator of urban youth, I can tell you that when communities invest deeply in children and their families, the results will be outstanding and make our city a much better place. Dr. Jacob Kramer Tibbs et al. From the Journal of Adolescent Health says it much better than I do, and the results speak for themselves. About 14 million children and adolescents regularly spend after school time without adult supervision, with approximately 4 million of these being 13 and 14-year-olds. Research has shown that unsupervised out of school time is associated with various negative youth outcomes, such as diminished academics and behavioral functioning and involvement in risky behaviors, including criminal behavior and substance use. Adolescent substance use in particular has been linked with unsupervised out of school time, especially among youth with low levels of parental monitoring. Recent research has also suggested that some after school programs may reduce substance use among adolescents. If doing what is morally right does not move you to action, maybe hard numbers will. A 2019 study from the Journal from the American Psychology Association states, we estimate the present value of saving a 14-year-old high-risk juvenile from a life of crime to range
30
from
seconds.
2.6 million to 5.3 million. Similarly, saving a high-risk youth at birth would save society between 2.6 and 4.4 million. Please note that these numbers are per individual. In short, investing in children and families is economically sound. I call for the City of Rochester to remove all police officers from public schools and refund half of the police budget and allocate it to education, housing, and community programs. Thank you for your time.
Chris Whitmire, Mayor.
I am writing to express my support for the removal of SROs from RCSD schools and an overall shift in investment of our collective city funds towards education, recreation, community building, and environmental improvement efforts. For too long, we have prioritized policing, and it has had a significant negative impact on our citizens and our community as a whole. We all want a safe city, but we must think differently about how we get to that point with a more systemic and long-term mindset. Every dollar spent on the RPD is an investment in the symptoms rather than the solution. I think it is reasonable to think that 50% of RPD's budget could be used in ways that lead to long-term reductions in crime and improvement of the conditions that lead to the perceptions of criminality that are reinforced through our policing system. When it comes to the SROs in schools, I believe they do more harm than good, and there is plenty of research to back up this claim. We must also think about what that money means in terms of what is not provided. Not having librarians or counselors does more harm than good. I am specifically interested in seeing the budget of the Department of Recreation and Youth Services increased to provide more nature-based programming, and increase in library funding and to add hours they are open. Increased tree canopy and green space investment in areas where there is little, and increase in the MOE funding to the Rochester City School District. These are ways we can build a resilient, connected city
30 seconds.
where well-being is prioritized.
Eamon Scanlon is joining us by Zoom.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and members of City Council. My name is Eamon Scanlon, Education Policy Manager at the Children's Agenda and a city resident. We'd like to thank you for including the elimination of school resource officers at the Rochester City School District in your proposed budget. And the Children's Agenda has advocated for the end of armed police in schools since the 2018-19 school year, and most recently during the RCSD budget deliberations. We have taken this position because there is no clear evidence that police within schools make them any safer, and there are some studies to suggest that they actually do more harm. This is a positive step to allow RCSD to redirect funds to evidence-based programs that support students' academic and social emotional growth. So we ask that you please vote to end the SRR program at RCSD and set an example for the rest of Monroe County and New York State. We also would like you to waive the $10 million cash capital requirement so RCSD will not have to close additional schools and lay off more staff. These are very difficult times for all of Rochester's families. Eliminating SROs from RCSD and waiving the cash capital requirement are positive steps towards building the type of school district. Vote yes. Thank you.
Mary Scarpoli, the voicemail.
My name is Mary Sarpoli. I'm a city resident and RCSD parent, and I'm calling to urge City Council members to support removing police presence from RCSD schools. The safety and security of our students has so much more to do with creating a positive, supportive school culture than metal detectors and police officers that assumes guilt and that feeds a school-to-prison pipeline. I also urge Council to divert the $10 million in capital funding to instead reinstate social and emotional support staff that our kids need now more than ever. Thank you.
Vicki Robinson, the voicemail.
Hello, my name is Vicki Robertson. I'm a city school parent. I would like to encourage City Council to waive the cash capital requirements and to stop the SRO program. We do not need police in our schools. They do not make students or parents feel safe. The statistics are clear. police in schools feeds the school to prison pipeline. Even though many individual officers are doing great work, it is bad policy and very expensive. With the money saved, the district can hire and train SSOs as well as counselors and social workers to make a positive climate and make everybody safer. Thank you.
Taurus Savant, voicemail.
To the esteemed members of Rochester City Council, my name is Taurus Savant. I am an artist and community advocate, and I am speaking to say that Black Lives Matter. And I urge Council to reconsider their decision as far as the opposition against defunding the police by at least 50%. By that, I mean the cutting of half of the police force when we are urging for the entirety of the police force. There was an argument that said that they would be cutting jobs for Black and brown police officers who would be in the neighborhood, who would have familiarity with the community, and it has been shown that that does not help the institutionalized racism that our residents and those folks will receive. And for that, I ask that the entirety of the class be cut, and that we continue to defund from the Rochester City Police Department, and have that instead be divested into funds for aid for our most vulnerable citizens, and have it reinvested into our communities, our initiatives, our arts, our education, our social workers, our mental health professionals, and stop having people out here with guns to terrorize our citizens. If we want to ensure trust and better relationship building with our communities, then you will listen to what we are saying. Thank you for your time.
Gloria Forgione, voicemail.
This is Gloria Forgione, and I'm calling to support the pulling the SROs from the city school district. And with that money that we're going to save, I feel that should be put into mental health services and counseling services in the school. And further, people working with children in the schools, be that teachers or other personnel, should be trained in trauma-informed best practices. This is so important to the well-being of our children in and out of school. Thank you so much.
Melissa Carlson, Zoom.
My name is Melissa. I live in the city and I'm a partner in Rocktricity. We are honored to be recommended to council for being Community Choice Aggregation Administrator, which will help bring an opportunity for affordable renewable energy to all city residents. We're also pleased the city of Rochester is showing leadership in providing renewable energy. Thank you for this opportunity.
Laura Smith, voicemail.
Laura Smith. I'm a Rochester City resident, and my daughter will enter the RCSD school system in 2022. Thank you for listening to my comments today. It is critical to invest in our schools and our children at this time, and I would ask that you do so by waiving the cash capital requirement and eliminating the school resource officer program. Our community is not made safer by having armed officers in our school, and I thank you for listening to the community on this matter and doing everything you can to support our children and their future. Thank you.
Danica Luntz Martin.
I was horrified when I saw the proposed 2020-2021 budget for the city of Rochester. As a city and a community, our budget speaks to our values and priorities louder than any words possibly could. The current proposed budget allocates the largest single fraction, 39% of the budget, to the public safety. Fiscal year 2021 budget 51820, page 41. This is more than twice the percentage allocated to RCSD and nearly 10 times the amount allocated to neighborhood and business development, recreation and youth services, or the library. Fiscal year 2021 budget 518, page 109, 1 through 46. This suggests that we value arresting members of our community who are struggling rather than providing them with the supports they need to survive and hopefully thrive. Instead of sending police to disperse or detain homeless Rochesterians, we need programs to supply housing, job coaching. We need more substance abuse counselors and mental health care professionals in place of police officers untrained in these issues. There are some programs that serve these purposes, but they don't have the resources, mainly money, to meet the need of our community. The children of our community have experienced an incredibly disruptive and stressful school year. First, the deficit in the RCSD budget led to mid-year teacher layoffs, then COVID-19 led to virtual learning
30
for the
seconds.
rest of the year. The RCSD budget deficit continues to lead to more cuts to teachers and school resources. It was not the fault of our students, yet they are the ones bearing the brunt of the repercussions. COVID-19 is unprecedented, and the impacts on the coming school year are still largely unknown. Regardless, our children still deserve an education. They are the future of our community and deserve greater city resources in accordance with their importance to us.
Time is up.
Vasiliki Georgia Kopoulos.
I am writing as a student of the Monroe County suburbs. It is no secret that our city is glaringly segregated, and nowhere is this fact more obvious to me than when looking at the handling of the Rochester City School District. Those students deserve a refund. It's imperative that the police are defunded by at least 50%, and those funds are refunded into the Rochester community. This is the only way to bring justice to those harmed by the violence of segregation. Any action council might take in the coming weeks must focus on increasing the quality of life for our most vulnerable residents through investing in community. Continuing to invest in policing is unforgivable and devoid of all humanity.
AJ Derwin, Zoom.
Good evening, council members. I want to address your budget proposal with respect to the PAB and policing. First, I'm supportive of your efforts to remove officers from Rochester City Schools, and I appreciate your support of the PAB and the ongoing legal challenge to its authority. You've shown a steadfast commitment to police accountability, and I commend you for it. However, as the Black Lives Matter demonstrations have shown us, the PAB is not the one and only solution to all the problems we see in the criminal justice system. That's why I support the call for defunding of police and reinvestment in communities. While I'm sure others will discuss what defunding means and how it can be achieved to make the Rochester community safer, I want to address some concerns I've heard about the legality of defunding RPD. Specifically, according to Article 30, Section 1 of the Locust Club contract, quote, "It is understood and agreed by both parties that the benefits conferred by this agreement are subject to the applicable provisions of law and to the appropriation of funds by City Council," close quote. Moreover, Section 6-16 of the Rochester City Charter grants exclusive authority to City Council to make appropriations for city treasury. Further, the New York State Civil Service Law, Article 5, Section 80, anticipates downsizing of public employees, such as police officers, based on, quote, "consolidation, abolition of functions, curtailment of activities, or otherwise," close quote.
30 seconds.
Thus, it is clear that according to state law, local law, and the collective bargaining agreement, that the power to reduce RPD's funding is in your hands. Additionally, according to data submitted by the RPD to the FBI, the clearance rate for property crime in Rochester is abysmally low. In 2018, it was only 13%. Thankfully, there's a growing body of research indicating there are safer and more effective alternatives to policing to address a wide variety of the social problems we see in our community.
Your time is up.
I call on you to invoke your power to defund RPD and reinvest in safer communities. Thank you.
Roberta Davis, voicemail.
Hello, City Council. My name is Roberta Davis, and I'm writing to you and calling to you about the fiscal year 2021 budget proposal. I'm asking you to make a visible commitment to racial justice by delaying your budget vote so that you can find other ways to redirect money away from the Rochester Police Department's overinflated budget. I'm urging you to pressure the city manager's office toward an ethical solution to the problem. Only 4% reallocation of funds proposed today falls far short of what the community is demanding. Research shows that a living wage, access to holistic health services and treatment, educational opportunity, and stable housing are far more successful at reducing crime than police or prisons. Please stop this slavery-based, worker antagonistic policy and structure. Please help us defund the police department and reinvest that money into worthy, wholesome services for the people. Thank you so much.
John Boutet, voicemail.
Hi, this is John Boutet. I just want to leave a note saying I strongly support making changes to the police contract so that the Lotus Club cannot block what we've been trying to do with the Police Accountability Board. We need to have a civilian review board for the police, and it's far too obvious from everything that's been going on in this country that the police departments, the way they're set up right now, are really running roughshod over the minority population in this country, and we have to change that. I mean, I've worked for the better part of 30 years as in PACTAC, and I have seen too often that concerns that are brought up about what's going on in the community are not taken seriously. We just have to get rid of the obstruction that is coming from the Lotus Club when it comes to getting an effective police accountability board in this community. If we have to defund the police and start from scratch, fine, but we can't let this go on again for as many years as we have. I've been in Rochester since '68 and keep hoping to see some real changes in the racism that permeates our society, and I think the current state of affairs with the police force is one of the problems, not one of the solutions right now. I hope you will make significant change.
Shirley Thompson, voicemail.
Hi, my name is Shirley Thompson. I'm a city resident in my home for going on 34 years now on Cutler Street. And I'm calling because I'd like council to know where I'm coming from related to the RPD budget. First, let me say that I'm disappointed that none of you attended the town hall meeting last night except for Councilwoman Mary Lupian. It would have been a wonderful opportunity for you to hear directly from people who care about this community. So I'm disappointed. But I'm calling to ask you to either make a very drastic cut to the RPD budget or to postpone the vote on the budget. I know that you might want to gather more information to answer any questions you have or to quell any concerns you have on the impact that a drastic cut would have. So if that's the case, then please postpone the vote. There are community members such as myself who believe that the RPD, our officers, could be utilized in a more constructive, effective way in our community. And we are torn by the violence that we've seen, the brutality that we've seen, and we want something new. So I understand your reluctance to step into what might feel like the unknown, but I'm asking you to draw on your deep, broad experience. You know this community, and you know that what we have right now is not working. So I'm asking you to please do what you need to do, research whatever you need to research, and come back with a decision, an informed decision, to drastically cut the RPD budget. It might not be 50%, but it really needs to be a significant redirection of funds.
2 minutes has elapsed.
McCoy Douglas.
Dear City Council, I am writing in response to the vote on whether to defund the police. I am a city resident who lives on Clifford Avenue. As you know, this is a high crime area for the most part. As someone is a current homeowner, I am asking that you all do not defund the police by the proposed amount. Why do I say that? Because this will only delay response time for crime victims if the RPD is understaffed. My first call would be to 911 should I become a crime victim, and I am sure I am not alone when I say that I would look to the police to protect me. Having said that, I think the alternatively reform is a dire necessity. We need their protection in addition to de-escalation and problem-solving skills. We are in need of being respected as individuals who have rights, but more importantly, we are human. We have mothers, fathers, and children, just like they do, who would mourn and be negatively affected by our brutality and, more importantly, our deaths. We need police who can recognize the subtle signs of mental illness and deal with them accordingly. For example, by placing them under a mental hygiene arrest instead of having them fight in the criminal justice system, unless they are a direct threat to others. Law enforcement should not be grabbing at and dragging people who are already otherwise upset as seen verbally only. They should seek to peacefully end disputes and encourage and facilitate mediation. They should be community partners that we have some reverential fear of, but we shouldn't
30
be
seconds.
fear of abuse and death. And in those cases of abuse and death, they should be prosecuted like anyone else. I think the majority of the money that is being potentially cut should be reallocated to more training that addresses not only cultural sensitivity, but also the aforementioned problem solving and de-escalation techniques in high stress situations. We do not need to restructure and, if possible, decrease the police union's funding for defending officers accused
Time
of
is up.
misconduct.
Andre Kahelski.
Dear council members, most concerned citizens agree that police reform is necessary in the US following the tragic events of Minneapolis and Atlanta. However, some people are calling for defunding police departments, and yesterday Malik Evans advocated for reducing RPD's budget. This is counterproductive. Even today, it can be difficult to get police response to a 911 call for a neighborhood disturbance or similar problem, because they are busy with more dire emergencies. Consider a night like May 30th, when police were overwhelmed with calls to dozens of vandalized locations. With less funding, neighborhoods get less protection. Vote yes to police reform, no to defunding the police.
Catherine De La Vergne.
Hello, my name is Catherine De La Vergne. I am writing to express my support of the Rochester Black Lives Matter platform. These demands include free them all, drop all charges brought against Rochester residents arrested on May 30th and at any subsequent protests. Number 2, defund the police. Start this year by reducing the police budget by 50%. Number 3, remove police from Rochester City School District. Number 4, serve the people. Elected officials and candidates should donate any and all contributions from law enforcement, PACs, donating all money from the police lobby to local bail funds. This should be transparent. 5, demilitarize the police. An end to the mass surveillance of our communities and the use of technologies that criminalize and target our communities, including IMSI, catchers, drones, and predictive policing software. End all forms of authoritarian practices like military intervention, expansion of executive privileges, and curfews. The people have a right to demonstrate and protest in the streets without being escalated by shows of military force. Number 6, cancel the rent. Housing is a human right. Cancel back rent and prohibit evictions. Reinvest funds from RPD to make safe housing a reality for all. Thank you.
Kelly Cheadle, Zoom.
So, not sure how many of you all are parents. If not, I'm guessing that you were all children at some point in your lives. But regardless, you've likely either uttered or heard the phrase, "What were you thinking?" at least once in your life. So there's this time when I was like 8 and I thought it would be really funny to trick my younger sister into tipping a bottle of chocolate sauce over her head. You can probably imagine what followed. What was I thinking? I mean, honestly, I don't remember. It was so long ago, and that's the sort of decision that you tend to block out. Anyhow, you might be wondering right now, what is this woman thinking? I mean, yeah. I saw yesterday's press conference, and for those of you who attended, honestly, I need to ask you the same thing. What were you thinking? When you got down on one knee, what exactly were you thinking about? Were you thinking about George Floyd? Were you thinking about whether or not you looked reverent enough? Were you thinking about what you were going to do today when it comes to voting on this budget? To be honest, I don't really need to know right now, but I need you to know. I need you to remember. You can write it down tonight if you've got a fuzzy memory like I do, but I need you to remember what you were thinking.
30 seconds.
Because if you don't meaningfully cut the RPD's budget today, or you don't amend it soon, if you don't invest in what truly keeps this community safer, the next time an officer from the RPD fails to do their job to protect and to serve, and heaven forbid they injure or kill one of us, I'm gonna be knocking on your office door to ask what your answer was.
Allie Dentinger, Zoom.
Good evening. The reflection of priorities. Time and time again, Council has passed a budget that attempts to police our way out of poverty and the deep systemic racism that is law enforcement. I implore you to see that now is the time to reinvest the RPD funding back into our community, instead of spending most of our money on the back end of social ills. We need a major shift to spending our tax dollars into preventative services, programs, and systems that will ensure everyone has access to basic things like housing, healthcare, and education. Once again, our city, state, and nation is reacting to the back end of a housing crisis. Pre-COVID-19, 2 out of 5 tenants in our city were already rent burdened and had code violations. The lost wages and economic impact of the pandemic is going to rear its head in 7 short days when the New York State eviction moratorium comes to a close. While the narrative of the federal government needs to act is going around rampant, I'm not holding my breath. The response at the state level has been poor, to say the least. Just a few weeks ago, you guys held an eviction work session. I don't need to tell you about that data anymore. Days later, many of you shared significant concerns about the impending eviction crisis and what you as council could do. There are 6 very tangible things that will significantly help stabilize our housing crisis and prevent evictions. Some require funding to be reallocated, others do not. We're calling on Rochester City Council to pass the COVID-19 Housing Stabilization Act that will accomplish the following. Cancel all the back rents for all Rochester residents. Notice, it's been done in Ithaca. So if it can be done in other parts of the state, it can happen here. Cease all the evictions filing, judgments, and warrants for the next until 30 days after the crisis. Give every person in court right to counsel. Pass the good cause eviction. Pass the tenant opportunity to purchase, and go back to the vacancy study that was passed. Please do not wait until the dam gates open and the evictions begin. Once it swings open, it's going to be nearly impossible to stop. City Council, you need to act now. I'll end with my opening statement.
Your time is up.
The budget is a reflection of priorities. Public Defender Dee Ponder said it best, our city is entitled to a refund. Please reject this budget, defund the police, and put it back into the community, and specifically into housing stability. Thank you.
James Thompson, voicemail.
Thank you, City Council members, for taking my recorded call. My name is James Thompson, and I'm a longtime resident of Rochester. I live on Cutler Street. I'm asking you to hold off on your budget vote today. We won't get many opportunities like this when the way is clear to actually make a vital change in Rochester's quality of life. And I think you have it in your hands now. I feel that if we diverted a significant amount of the police budget toward uplifting our community, there would be little need for many police at all. Most of the work the police do doesn't require their armed presence. And armed force is a trigger for many people who have been unjustly put at the wrong end of the gun, particularly people of color and poor people. So we don't need armed enforcers keeping us in line. But we do need more people deeply trained in conflict mediation and de-escalation of anger. We need people deeply trained in community mental health issues. We need people trained in recognizing and understanding how to work with traumatized people. We need to have money diverted to educational programs, especially for the post-pandemic world. We need programs that support people to move toward employment. This pause in our pre-pandemic lives is now trying to come to an end, but it's given us time to reflect and see how we've gone wrong in so many ways. This could be our last opportunity to press the reset button, including moving from a police state kind of a mode to a village model of our community. Please take advantage of this and continue. We know that you want to help people. You're from the people, so please do what you need to do and pause on this vote. Thank you.
Margaret Kiefer.
I am writing to you to call for the defunding of the Rochester Police Department. I urge you to cut their budget by 50%, as 86% of adult arrests are for misdemeanors and violent crimes make up only 7%. The RPD clears only 29% of crimes. Why are we arresting an overwhelming percent of adults for low-level crime? The most common crime in Rochester is property crime, specifically larcenies. RPD has an astoundingly low clearance rate, 10%, for its most common crime, larceny. They are failing at their job, and we want our money back to invest in resources that actually work. Council members, I urge you today to invest in systems that work and stop giving money to the ineffective RPD. Thank you.
Dassy Camigio.
My name is Dassy DiMigio. I am a young Black woman born and raised in the Rochester metropolitan area, and I love this city with all of my heart. I'm a second-generation immigrant. I'm a college student hoping to one day become a human rights lawyer. I'm a sister, a daughter, a friend, and an advocate, but none of those facets of my identity supersede the fact that I am a human being. Though there are forces working against my survival every day of my life, I know my worth. Like the late legend Maya Angelou said, still I rise. Today I am calling on all of you to help me rise. I am calling on you to affirm my humanity and the humanity of all Black people through your actions. I am calling on you to care. I see that you have proposed to cut 3.6 million from the RPD as well as other reforms. While these are in the right direction, the only way to truly break from these carceral chains, is through the abolition of the RPD. When the RPD's police budget shows that 86% of the crimes they handle are misdemeanors with a low solve percentage that is indicative of systemic over-policing rather than a force dedicated to truly preserving public safety. When there are officers in our schools who perpetuate the demonization of Black and brown youth, that is a product of the insidious school to prison pipeline. When only 7% of reported crimes in Rochester are violent crimes,
30
that contradicts
seconds.
the narrative that the RPD is supposedly protecting our community. There is no justification for an over $90 million budget for the RPD. I am wary when I see that you plan to redirect $750,000 towards revamp policing compared to $130,000 to recreation and youth services. What will that revamped policing look like? Will you listen to the needs of the people of Rochester? Will you
Time is up.
substantially?
Kevin Brennan.
I urge all city council members to seriously consider the requirements for having a robust police department in the city of Rochester. In my opinion, the police department is currently underfunded as police are not able to patrol neighborhoods routinely, but rather only respond to 911 calls. So that means police are reactive rather than proactive. Cutting any funding to the police department will make this situation worse and adversely affect the neighborhoods which are in the greatest need of police protection. Crime increases when people believe that there are no consequences to their actions. Criminals therefore prey on the innocent and the weak, and without the threat of punishment and jail time, crime will increase and citizens will grow more and more fearful of living in their own neighborhoods. I have heard on the radio that one proposal is to reduce the number of the new recruits by 50%. That's a terrible idea. Your goal should be greater diversity, and bringing in young people of different backgrounds will enhance the police department and its relationship with the community.
Julia Coffey.
My name is Julia Coffey. I am 20 years old, white, and I urge you to defund the police in Rochester, New York. You are no stranger to what is going on throughout our country. But what I ask of you is, how long have you been aware of the stark racism, inequality, brutality, and fear as displayed by our city's police department? How long have you known what pain this department has caused, the fear it inflicts, the pieces it has left behind for the Black community to pick up? And why is it just now that you seem open to listening? I come from a perspective of immense privilege. I live next to the previous police chief and see less police patrolling my street than those who see officers swaggering throughout their high school hallways. This is not a letter to say I hate the police, but I do come to you to say that you must do better. You cannot go about your day knowing what damage has been done and is allowed to occur without changing this flawed system. Defund the police. It is a simple request. Why are suicide attempts met with police and not mental health specialists? Why are homeless people picking up recyclables subject to harassment and potential arrest when we should be offering the services to help them escape such a vicious and inhumane cycle? We do not need police to stop crime. We need systems in place to prevent it. I have confidence that you are intelligent enough to understand that. You may refute me with, it's not that simple. And I have to say, no, it really is that simple. Studies have proven this, samples have proven this, and the people want it. The people that are targeted by this system, who are in the closest proximity to police brutality and presence in their lives, are begging you, not those that have never seen an officer except on their day in elementary school. It really is that simple. Thank you for your time.
Stephen Bryan.
The city must focus on vast reduction on the number of police. The money spent on the police department, the weaponry used by police, and particularly the presence of police in RCSD schools. We must fight to end the systemic racism, violence, and school-to-prison pipeline that came from hundreds of years of racist policy and complete lack of accountability regarding our law enforcement. Proposed spending on additional police and additional resources for police would be further entrenching the problem and must be strictly opposed. My daughter was accepted into SODA. The first time we went to visit, there were armed police standing around in the building. That is not conducive to an educational environment, and is the primary reason we elected to keep her in private school and does not have agents and equipment of violence and oppression on the premises. I hope I can trust you to do what is right for the people of this city and promise to work and to hold you accountable at the ballot box if you fail us.
Mark Howden, voicemail.
My name is Martha Howden, and I'm a resident of Rochester. I'm writing about the fiscal year 2021 budget proposal. I'm strongly requesting that the Rochester City Council make a visible commitment to racial justice. I am asking you to delay the budget vote so the council can find ways to redirect money away from the Rochester Police Department, whose budget is excessive. These funds would be better spent in an ethical and equitable way of the city's expenditures. 4% reallocation is not enough. Providing money for a living wage, access to first-rate health services and treatment, equitable educational opportunities, and stable housing have been shown to be much more successful at reducing crime than police or prison. These are the areas where the money will have the most benefit. Rochester's poor communities and communities of color who are disproportionate targets of police violence will only have justice when the police are reformed. This isn't possible until we defund them. There has to be a major shift to be able to create a community where all races, all classes, especially persons of color, are treated with respect and equity. This will require an alternative budget rather than the one that's now presented. I am hoping you can be counted on to consider an alternative budget with the focus on social service programs, which will bring.
Trevor Pitt.
I am deeply concerned that the funding of the Rochester Police Department is astronomically high compared to the distribution of the other funds, which include development, neighborhood preservation, youth services, and libraries. I believe that the city of Rochester, the city I grew up in and love wholeheartedly, will be pedaling backwards, giving over $80 million in funds to the police department, especially when 80% of adult arrests are misdemeanors and 7% of the crimes are violent. The time is now to progress forward and lay out a foundation for the future generations, a future of hopelessness and education, and education that will reduce crime in the long run through a more wise and intelligent society rather than putting a Band-Aid on a problem that requires surgery and having the money allocated to a force that people are beginning to fear when they should be seen as protection for the community. Constant budgets like this one will have a recurring problem of mental health and poverty and will have generational impacts if not taken into accord, especially during one of the most powerful civil rights movements in history. I really hope you can reconsider this budget and allow Rochester to be a prosperous city for everyone to thrive and grow.
Christie Oliveri.
I was not born in Rochester, but I've been a proud member of this community for the last 10 years. In my work as a student, counselor, and nonprofit employee, I have been overwhelmed by the inequity in our community. This needs to change. Not only is our public school system suffering, but the architecture of our city is designed to enable colorblindness. The inner loop creates a clear divide between the have and the have-nots. Our suburban schools are provided with resources, teacher security, and a level of education that our city schools are not. Our students are provided with the same lunches that our inmates are. Students come to school to have their needs met, and this is not the case. I'm asking you to consider defunding the police and use the money to repair our city schools and infrastructure.
Michael Mazzio.
The incident in Minneapolis should have by now brought home to everyone the need to make changes and reforms in the way we police in America. We have been vocal going back 16 years when the city chose to remove police stations from our neighborhoods, which we believe has been the greatest contributing factor in the downward trend in police-community relations. With those years came burdens placed on the police from the closing of mental health facilities and group homes. The growing drug epidemic, increase in poverty, and significant rise in illegal guns on our streets have made an already difficult job that much more impossible to handle. Over these past 16 years, only a Band-Aid approach to reaching success has been given to address our problems. It is always easy to place blame or simply throw out suggestions like taking funds and resources away from a police department and utilize them in other ways. While it sounds like a plan, the reality is there is not one actual written detailed plan to review. There is no research to determine that the funds moved from the police department will even be a factor that will contribute to any noticeable change. Perhaps huge amounts of money invested in other areas could result in real positive change, but that is not what is being considered. The reality for our city is we need public safety, and to provide that service adequately takes services that are in place 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It takes a set number
30
of
seconds.
personnel to adequately provide those services in a safe and efficient manner. The study showed the importance of response time, but more importantly, is having the time necessary to adequately address a problem and provide answers to problems, not shortcutting the service to respond quickly to the next problem. As we have said before, there are a lot of articles and books to tell you how to do things better, but they are generic in nature and not unique to our community's needs. Before you make things worse, spend some more time and yes, money on finding real solutions to our problems, not to address problems that are in some other part of the country.
Willihan.
I teach as part of the RCSD UPK program and want to express the urgent need to defund the police. First, all cops need to be removed from schools. Schools are supposed to be safe places for our children, and when cops are present, the reality of trauma, fear, and danger are also present. Removing the cops allows for a safer and more nurturing environment. Second, I feel offended by the current fragmented proposal in reduction to RPD. While as a community, we are still reeling from the reality of teacher layoffs across the district, we need to flood our schools with money. And when the question is posed, where does that money come from? The answer is a 50% reduction of the RPD budget and the refunded reallocation of the money into our schools and other social service programming. Also, I demand justice for Naila, the 10-year-old child the RPD traumatized by putting in handcuffs and taking her away from her mother. Across the nation and locally in Rochester, police are out of control in their overexertion of power. We must act. It starts by voting no on this budget the way it stands, until revised to reflect the community's demands of a 50% reduction from RPD and a refund of that money to the community. Thank you.
John Nichols, voicemail.
Hi, I am John Nichols, and I live in the city of Rochester. I am calling today to call the Rochester City Council to defund the Rochester Police by at least 50% and transfer those funds to the Rochester City School District. Thank you for your time.
Carolyn DeVecchio.
Dear council members, please take this opportunity to be brave, to not hide behind the status quo or the ever seductive need of more time and defund the Rochester Police. The budget has been proposed, takes the wind out of the sails of young people that have passion I'm sure you once felt. The actions taken by this body should at the very least embolden and give hope to that spirit, not squash it. We have a responsibility as an older generation to nurture and hear the transformational passion of the next generation, to stretch and blow into it, not stall and stuff it. Think what we could do if we stopped fighting our young people and instead got the wind at our backs. Take a risk. Leap before looking. Allow the community to catch you. Minneapolis has committed to disbanding their police department. San Francisco will be sending unarmed professionals to all but the most egregious of cases. Why shouldn't Rochester lead as we always have? Please follow the spirit of change. If the police pull back, tensions in our neighborhoods will decrease. The energy of a constant threat and betrayal infuses everything that we do. It cannot be denied that regardless of who was telling the story, once the police presence thinned and calmed at the protests, so did the violence and confrontation. This energy and truth of the history of police, who they are here for, why
30
they are
seconds.
here, and how they really think and feel is the thrum under the speeches and press conferences. It can be painted over, but it is still felt, and it is triggering to deep trauma that cannot be fully seen and healed by reforms and speeches alone. The police are hurting people. They have a terrible success rate. Their attitude is as militant us versus them instead of a sober, sacrificial public servant like the heart of a firefighter who knows they might pay the ultimate price. They are dismally trained.
Time is up.
Mary Prochaska. Chaska.
We must defund the police. Taking $130,000 from overtime and reducing the incoming class of police officers is a good start, but its thinking's too small. Cut the budget in half and take the money and put it into housing first housing programs. Continue to fund the Department of Recreation and Youth Services, fund the library, fund needle exchanges and other substance abuse programs. The list goes on and on. In addition to halving the police budget, the council should also vote not to rezone and build 3 new precincts and use $30 million to fund these programs, with a combined total of $78 million. You have the chance to make real change here in Rochester, and I urge the council to take that chance.
Dean Wilson.
A 4% redirection of police spending is not enough. 4% does not demand change. It does not necessitate choices. 4% does not make police choose between weapons to use against our neighbors and paychecks for their officers. It does not send a message that they must re-envision the way they work and their interactions with communities they occupy. It does not tell them they must choose between maintaining their tanks and their patrol cars when things break down. 4% sends no message except keep doing what you're doing. And what they're doing is categorically and systematically oppressive. 4% is a bad joke. It's a campaign blurb for city council to use next year and pretend that they listen when they have not. 4% is a dereliction of duties, or 50% is a statement. Do it better.
That's the last speaker.
That concludes the Speak to Council segment. We will commence the full council meeting in just the short pause.